Koutou katoa, ko aorangi te manga tapu, ko rangitiki rawa ko mō whangorahi te awa. Ko Ngāti Whiti me Ngāti Samanga iwi, ko mōkai Pātia te rohe pōtai. Ko Whitikaupika te marae, ko Sala McCarthy-Stonex tōku ingoa, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora whānau, nau mai, haere mai, and aloha mai kākou. My name is Sala McCarthy-Stonex, and I am here today to kind of hopefully provide some insights based on my life experience and the research that I've undertaken to date. First of all, thank you very much, Jake, for that beautiful vision. It was I was getting distracted from my own whakaaro, just imagining that future. So grateful for that. It kind of grounded me and brought me back to that shared vision, I think, that we have for our peoples. So yeah, kia ora everyone. My presentation will kind of walk us through how we can examine self and indigeneity in the research that we're doing and how we capture knowledge. You can go to the next slide, please. Here's just a brief agenda, kind of an introduction about myself, my background, a little bit more about my whakapapa and the experiences that I've had that have kind of brought me to my understanding and kind of the passions that I have working within the government sector and also across Indigenous peoples. And then decolonisation, I know, is quite a big and mammoth task at points, but kind of bringing my whakaaro to help empower and make that journey a bit less of a daunting task. Some tools for reframing and some key takeaways and a conclusion. Go forward. So yeah, kind of already talked through this, but how we can provide that alternative lens to our worldview and just kind of identify those critical gaps in our understanding, not that we hold, but in kind of how we interact with the world that we have today, and be able to provide us with that paradigm shift or pivot, really, to continue progressing towards a future and that vision that Jake kind of shared earlier. Next, please. So ko waiao. As Josh introduced me, I was born in Tamaki Makaurau to my mum, who whakapapas back to Mōkai Pātia and then my dad, who is tangata tiriti. He is German, English, and has some Tongan whakapapa as well. We moved away from Aotearoa when I was about 2.5 years old to the Navajo reservation, a Navajo reservation in the United States, and that kind of introduced me to another worldview that was, though it was not my culture at the time, it clearly resonated with me, being able to have that reo immersion and also recognizing their value and connection to the land. So grasping my indigeneity kind of came quite early on, and then we moved to Hawaii and the history there throughout colonization and just history and wars of the world. There's a lot of Asian influence, and again, not the culture that I was born into, but something we shared, that kind of collective understanding and value of the land, the sea, and that was kind of where I started gripping up kind of where I was, what I wanted to do in life. And our people are great at caring for the land and having that grassroots, being involved with our communities, with our people. And while I really appreciated that, I recognized that we lack that sustainability, right? As it gets further up the line, we don't have that representation, that knowledge base that actually is grounded within our indigeneity. Knowledge has been taken from us and misappropriated in times, but also used to kind of lay the foundation. But as we move along, we've been disconnected, and we want to bring that connection back. And what that means is coming back to the land, and climate change, as we're all aware of, is fundamentally drives that kōrero. So yeah, next please. So one of the kind of key points I wanted to share today is how we interact with the world, how we look at it, and our ways of being. And growing up in the States and then having come home quite often, but also just traveling and seeing more and more about the world, we have it on a very simple disconnect between how we interact is a understanding of the world that we live in. Scarcity versus abundance. It's very small, but it kind of enables us to draw meaning from where we're trying to go. So I put in here, the Anglo-Saxon American West is predicated upon the basic assumption that we live in a world of scarcity, where resources are finite. That finite understanding introduces the concepts of competition, where we have to give up certain resources in order to accomplish other things. In contrast to that assumption is the way that we Indigenous peoples engage and our way of being, which is that we live in a world of abundance where resources are plentiful. Growing up in, on islands, we understand that if we take care of the land, take care of the oceans, that it will in turn provide us with the resources that we need to flourish and survive. And so that basic understanding is very different. It's quite small but profound. So when we get into the government, and as Jake mentioned, COP26, that Western way of the world that we kind of continue to engage with, it's not that the systems and governments that we have are broken, rather they were never designed to serve us in the first place, and they need us, right? They need us to not only have that grounding in our indigeneity, but be the translators for our people and the bridge builders, find and draw meaning within the existing frameworks that we have and are socialized and popularized throughout the world. Next, please. Which kind of brings me to where I've done my study. I did my master's in public administration, again, because I wanted to be able to provide that sustainability, provide that skill and lens for our people, so it was more responsive and actually reflected the needs and the complexities that we face. So decolonizing our research is, again, it's massive, but if we have, if we're able to draw kind of it back to those values and uplift those Indigenous values and perspectives and uplift those voices, then we'll be able to better serve our people in the ways, in the rooms and at the tables and within the forums that we're typically ignored or disregarded. So some of the ways I've been able to do that is drawing the connections between individualism and collectivism. So one example that I've been recently kind of battering around is the purpose of whakapapa, right? It allows us to place our individual self within the collective, to start bridging gaps and connecting peoples through life experience, through shared whakapapa, but also just show and break down those initial barriers of affiliation and how we're connected as people. Some other examples that I kind of threw in there that I have found from other cultures is jiko shokai, which is Japanese. And again, it not only tells your title, but who you are, where you come from. And in the Western world, right, introductions are generally approached from that paradigm, right? This is my name, but this is what I do. This is my title within this organization, not necessarily providing you any breadth beyond the professional life. But for us, as we know, we have the intersectionality, that interconnectedness in this globalized world, that we will be able to find that shared connection and shared meaning. And how we're doing it has generally been through colonized mechanisms or frameworks. And another fact about me, I was born into a family and raised Mormon, so religion and having to grapple with that as a concept of colonialism, because we whakapapa back to the church generally rather than to the whenua, and having to deconstruct and dissect my identity based on those approaches is quite difficult. But again, you find that shared meaning, you want to, we have that desire to come together it's kind of human nature. While we're not homogenous, we have that desire to create networks and families and meaning, shared supports. So yeah, so another one I kind of put in there was competition versus collaboration, back to the scarcity versus abundance thing. It's an and concept, not an and or. And I mentioned paradigm shift, but kind of shifted it to a pivot because I recently was doing more research into how the paradigm shift is, again, an inherently competitive framework. Because I find that when you say that, people automatically have that barrier of, oh, you're wanting to replace my understanding, my way of operating with the world with a new one. And we're not trying to do that. Like, we just want to uplift and widen the scope, right? So decolonization of research methods, how we're doing that, checking assumptions, questioning givens, and being that kind of backstop, while not the catch-all. We will act in that capacity when it comes to this knowledge base and how we capture that, and autoethnography, particularly with how we are able to bring ourselves to the table and fulfill that role, not the only one, but be champions, be kaitiaki and guardians rather than gatekeepers of knowledge, provide others with that new lens. And yes, it kind of keeps us with that onus of response and responsibility, but we're, again, creating a foundation that we can have transformative shifts and be able to achieve the vision that we want as Indigenous peoples. And kind of further to my research and what I've been doing, quantifying qualitative experiences, i.e. providing a way and a methodology to translate our lived experiences as Indigenous peoples into numbers, into ways that we know that speak to government and, you know, the Western and white world that we live in. Being able to provide that connection is empowering, rather than, you know, pointing out an issue and then just kind of leaving it there, not providing a way forward, not progressing it. Because as Matua Gary has shared with us before, we are not the carvers, but we are the tools of our tipuna, and we care about the past, today, and the future. It's the longevity. So yeah, next please. So yes, back to the reframing and shifting. Within successful, popular, existing frameworks and methodologies, we can succeed. It's pulling out and uplifting that Indigenous value, that Indigenous voice, and being able to guide and direct, because that knowledge, that mataranga, is power. And if we allow it to continually be taken, well, not allow it, but if it's continued to be taken from us and misappropriated, then we'll lose sight and lose direction of where we're trying to go. Indigenous thought and methodologies are out there, they do exist, and which is why we kind of find meaning and are able to connect and resonate with a lot of frameworks that we come across. I have some examples in here, like alternative dispute resolution, mediation, because we care about the person and the relationship that is shared. Charter schools and non-traditional community-based methods of learning are similar to talanoa and wānanga, which we have done, and how we pass on knowledge and share those stories. It's how we've always lived. I also have in here kind of the Aberger Institute and Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective Peoples. Again, these are what things, these are frameworks that the West love. They buy into, we use them often, and we resonate with that. But the power is often, or can be, misappropriated. And a bad example of that is kind of multi-level marketing, for those who are familiar. Or network marketing, because, you know, we want our whānau to succeed. We want to provide that shared understanding, but if we don't actually know where you're going to with that, it can become something that is making money off the backs of other people. You're not lifting, you end up kind of using and extracting knowledge. So it's always in the nuance as well, like even reciprocity. For us, we understand that it's not necessarily just a give and take, it's a share and equitable kind of frame, but to the Western world, it can be give and take, meaning at every point you have to reciprocate X or reciprocate any efforts. But sometimes we have to flip it on its head and be like, well, if we are being equitable, if we're being truly if we're truly embodying what reciprocity means, then sometimes we just give freely and allow that to be where we come from, which is how we interact with the land. And again, kind of what can we do? Reframe the conversation, be the kind of that backstop in the room, or not necessarily the rock in the boat always, but providing that service for our people so that we can continue forward. Next, thank you. So yeah, kind of drawing it back to the theme of this one is drawing from local Indigenous knowledge bases will enable us to go further. And by grounding ourselves in our indigeneity, we're able to navigate the way forward that is meaningful, responsive, and effective to the complexities that we have today. And some key takeaways in the next screen, I think. Well, that small one that is not really readable is resulting issues from the fundamental disconnects between values bases and assumptions of the hegemonic and Western powers result in dynamic, multi-layered and multifaceted issues that with solutions that lack a foundation that is relevant and actually responsive to our needs. So in an increasingly globalized and interconnected world, we can share that knowledge base and provide a way forward. And our role is to bridge gaps, translate meaning, and draw those connections.